So today, we are going to make a video on these calendar things my dad gave me.
You might be the redneck if.
But here, let me say it right. If your wedding toast was in styrofoam cups, you might be a redneck. Get her done.
Here, let's just say the topic, since this is about you might be a redneck if. Okay. Your birthstone is concrete.
Okay, this one is especially for my boyfriend Matt. You might be a redneck if you've fallen asleep on the commode.
You might be a redneck if you've got a tattoo that says mother, but it's spelled wrong.
You might be a redneck if your mother doesn't put on shoes to go grocery shopping. I wouldn't.
You might be a redneck if your dog's favorite food is Cheetos.
You might be a redneck if every time you roll over in your sleep a dog yelps. Alyssa.
You might be a redneck if you tuck your shirt into your underpants. I'd say you're more of a nerd if you did that.
You might be a redneck if you've used El Camino as a hearse.
You might be a redneck if your one call from jail is to vote on American Idol.
You might be a redneck if you sneeze can disrupt TV reception. That's funny.
You have to read this one. I'm not allowed.
You might be a redneck if your marriage vows are never again and when hell freezes over. That's awesome.
I'm in Bay. You might be a redneck if you clogged your drains with pet hair.
We've done that. You might be a redneck if the cleanest restroom you ever used was at an interstate gas station.
You might be a redneck if your stomach is bigger than any shirt you own.
You might be a redneck if you strip naked to the waist to eat barbecue. You might be a redneck if your kid's favorite teething ring is the garden hose in the front yard. That was mine. I loved the garden hose.
You might be a redneck if you think a turtleneck, which in this one they're thinking about the shirt, is a key ingredient to soup.
Okay, so this one's for me. And babe, I'm sorry, if Dog the Bounty Hunter were to ever come on, I would stop to watch it. You might be a redneck if you've interrupted lovemaking to watch Dog the Bounty Hunter.
You might be,
and I will too.
You might be a redneck if you've had 6 weddings but no anniversaries.
You might be a redneck if you ever had to shave your legs to get a pair of pants to fit. Alyssa.
Let's see. You might be a redneck if the only home deliveries you get are babies.
You might be a redneck if you can name more wrestlers than senators. Yeah. No, I can't name any senators. Although, yes, I can. But mainly wrestlers.
You might be a redneck if you're wearing if you're wearing a John Deere hat in your senior picture.
I am. But it's not the one in the yearbook. You might be a redneck if you think Netflix is a movie about fishing. Yes! No, when I first actually heard Netflix, I thought about fishing.
You might be a redneck if you wear cowboy boots without socks.
You might be a redneck if you think a health kick is smoking light cigarettes and drinking wine coolers.
You might be a redneck if your aunt was buried wearing a tube top and hot pants.
You're never home on a rent day. You might be a redneck. Get her done.
Your prom dress was knitted. Be a redneck if that.
You gotta be more like fun about this. So Alyssa, you avoid having a girlfriend between Christmas. No, that's not one for you. That's like the worst one to start out on.
Jerica, you might be a redneck if you stiffed a yawn during your marriage vows. You're not married.
Hey, Alyssa, if you've ever plucked a nose hair with a pair of pliers, you might be a redneck.
No, I don't think pliers can fit on my nose. You might be a redneck if the collar on your dog cost more than what you're wearing. Is Scooby wearing a collar right now? I don't know how much.
You might be a redneck if your kids think past due is a return address.
What?
You might be a redneck if
okay.
you're, yeah.
You might be a redneck if you're always available for jury duty.
Your wedding reception featured a moon bounce. You might be a redneck. Get her done.
You might be a redneck if your watch band is wider than any book you've ever read.
You might be a redneck if you've ever relieved yourself from a moving vehicle. That was so good.
You might be a redneck if you wear
Marlboro
windbreaker
to church. Yes. You might be a redneck if the only newspapers in your home are lining the litter box. That's awesome. No, they're lining Dad's bathroom.
You might be a redneck if you've broken a promise, a heart, and a wind during the same happy hour.
You have a recipe for catfish lasagna. You might be a redneck.
You might be a redneck if you've ever been on television not wearing a shirt.
Your wife's hair color is whatever's on special. You might be a redneck.
Are we done yet? You might be a redneck if your favorite TV show is in... Ah! Never mind. Might be a redneck if the Elvis theme of your wedding ceremony was...
Alright, well, we do gotta stop this right now.
Wait, I want to read last one.
You might be a redneck if you ever use a tablespoon as a shoehorn. There you go.
Bye.
Have a nice day, y'all.
Ah!